All right. Yes, ma'am. Jackson.
To address our concerns. However, I love departmentalization, and I'm going to express why. We have some very, very strong teachers here in Clayton County in certain subject areas, not all areas for elementary. Of course, we should if we work in elementary. However, I think if you departmentalize and you hone in on those teacher skills, then you're going to get more success out of the students. And I say that to mean I teach math. And over the last 3 years, I've seen my scores, achievement scores, go up. Last year, 96%. 62 kids, only 2 kids did not pass because I'm able to plan better with one subject. In elementary, when I taught all subjects, it was overwhelming. It was really overwhelming. So for that matter, I do see, people are different. You like teaching all the subjects. I prefer to teach what I'm, what I'm good at. I have a lot of concerns. However, I don't want to complain. I just want to kind of just dialogue as he's brought us here. I like the idea that you said that you would like for high school teachers to come down and model. I think we have a plan in place for modeling and getting teachers able to be able to be better educators. I think that was the reasoning behind the implementation of the instructional facilitators. They should be modeling at your schools and showing those teachers this is explicit instruction. This is what it should look like. I know we've asked for it at our school. We've asked for it from the early release days. Can we see explicit instruction being done? Because it's almost like you're telling us to do it, but you're not showing us what it looks like. So those are some things, and I think we got some good things happening in Clayton County. I think we just need to hone in on and make sure that we're utilizing the assets that we have to the best of our ability here.
And if I could respond, I think your response relative to departmentalization and your position shows us why there's no one answer to every situation. Because there are situations, and I would agree with you, I would rather deal with 20 children at that age level than I would, as a high school teacher, 150. And so, but on the same token, being a math major and a high school math teacher, I understand being able to focus in and support focusing in on one subject and going deep with that subject, which I think sometimes can be a challenge for teachers when they're not departmentalized. But there is a solution. And the solution is not one size fit all. The solution is, like you just shared, why can't we at the elementary school work with our maybe middle and high school teachers and do some content collaboration? And having high school secondary teachers or those who like departmentalization or who really just appreciate the pros of it, support those who may be maybe a little deeper or stronger in the content area because they've had the time to go deeper and become stronger in the content area. Spending time with those who are not departmentalized to ensure that our kids don't experience a gap in content depth as they go from classroom to classroom or grade to grade. And I think that's why this conversation is important. I really want people to move away from a one-size-fit-all and think critically about the work and the resources and the people and figure out a way. But it takes people coming together to do that, doesn't it? It takes dialogue. It takes people coming together to figure out, okay, what's the best way to approach it? Because I can tell you this, you've got some schools that are departmentalized in grades 3, 4, and 5, and they're doing very well. You've got some who've decided to only do it in grades 4 and 5 because they, through their working with their population, they didn't think the third graders were ready. But remember, as I always say with everything, there are always pros and what? And that's what I try to always get people to understand. When you think critically about a situation, you think about the pros and the what? And then you work with the team to come up with the best solution for your situation, acknowledging the pros and the what. Don't do it half-sidedly or half-informed. Be informed, because when you're fully informed, then you can work to mitigate the cons. But I would agree with you, at the elementary level, even for a parent, it's easier to deal with one teacher than it is to deal with four. And God don't have, several children in elementary school in grades 3, 4, and 5. That may be quite a bit of teachers, and you're going to deal with that once they get to high school, but, sometimes you just want to take your time getting there as a parent. So, but those are conversations that should be occurring at the school level, within the cluster. The high school principal should be working with the middle school principal that feeds into the high school, and the elementary principal should be working with the middle school principal and the high school principal, looking at the data and having those conversations and those opportunities. And at the same time, as to address your concern, we are offering district level staff development content sessions, but I'll tell you what one of the challenges is. We offer them after school and folk are tired. And so we offer it on Saturday and they've got family, And so they're not as well attended as we'd like them to attend, but we're working with the principals to offer those sessions strategically. It may not be the case that everybody needs to attend, but we may have some individuals, the data would tell us they need to be there, or you got some teacher leaders who need to be there, and then they can come back and redeliver for the faculty or for the grade level or the group of the subject department. But there are just creative ways to do it. I think the point is, look at your data and everybody come to the table and let's decide how we're going to attack this problem. Whether it be vertical planning, working with at middle and elementary schools, or whether it be taking advantage of the district level offerings, or whether it be bringing in an external service provider like some company that can provide the content development. Those are adaptive problems, like I like to call them, that can be worked out when you have the right people at the table. But recognizing you got a problem, the data tells us this, but here are our solutions, and we got to all come together to get that solved. And that's really the work. I think sometimes we make that too complicated. But the bottom line is, if we know the stronger we are as adults and teachers in our content area, the better our students will perform than all of us, and even myself included. We should always be working to improve in our content area. And of course, pedagogy, we should all be working to improve in how we teach, our strategies that we're used to teach and assess students. Okay, anyone else? Feel free to share.
Hi, my name is Charlene Vines, and I'm a little bit different than you all because I've only taught first grade and then an EIP teacher. So I'm looking at things a little bit differently, only because it's disheartening when you're teaching kindergartners and then they come to first grade. And when they come to first grade, some of them aren't strong enough to be there. So once they're behind, they never catch up because you're just kind of passing them along. And I understand parents do not want their child held behind. What's kindergarten? Kindergarten means a lot because that's a foundation, and they're building blocks. So if they don't get it in K1 and 2, it's hard, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And that's what I have issues with, because the curriculum is so fast-paced. And when you start out teaching first graders with graphs and charts, but they haven't started adding and subtracting, what good is the chart? It's the basics. And I think we've gotten away from the basics. Because as an EIP teacher, I taught 5th grade math. I had to reteach myself. And in doing that, I taught them the steps, the bracket, the divisor, the dividend, the quotient. Once they learned that, they were ready when they went back to class. But you have to have it aligned. Then when they got Success Maker, that took away from what I could do to assist the teacher in the classroom with the same skill. So I'm a little bit different because I don't know departmentalized. I've only been self-contained. I've always taught all subjects. But And it's just a difficult thing. And like I said, it disheartens me when I see a student that I taught that was DES in first grade that did not do well. And in the third grade, he was not that much further along. So then he's going on to fourth grade. And how are we getting them career ready to be productive citizens in a global society if the curriculum is one way and you're trying to keep up? So if you have to reteach and you miss a day, it's hard to catch up to get them back on track. So it's just a difficult thing.
And I would agree with you, but as I listen to your concern, it's very similar to her concern. Because the solution, sometimes we think, well, we just hold back the kindergartner. Well, anybody who understands brain theory knows that all kindergartners are not going to learn at the same pace. So holding everyone back just because they don't necessarily reach a particular standard is not necessarily the solution. But if you're teaching first grade, working collaboratively with the kindergarten teachers to ensure that, okay, these are things we need to know, we need to make sure these kids have before they get to kindergarten. And so what can we do to support that effort? So working collaboratively with them. And sometimes it's amazing, we're in the same building and probably on the same halls, and we're not talking to each other. And I think part of the solution is we need to be having those vertical conversations. The first grade teacher should be conversing with the kindergarten teachers, and the first grade teacher should be conversing with the second grade teachers, looking at whatever data is available, ensuring that we address those gaps. I think one reality we have to acknowledge is that everybody who comes into kindergarten doesn't come into kindergarten ready for kindergarten.
But that's what they want.
Or any grade.
Right.
And so, I think, and some people say, well, I don't like the social promotion, but you have to acknowledge that really, based upon where the kid started in kindergarten, the kid has really made a year's worth of growth, probably more than a year's worth of growth. And so the question is, humanly possible, they've made the growth that is humanly possible for the time period that the teacher has a student. So even though it looks like they're not ready for first grade, the question's, do you retain them in kindergarten even though they made over a year's worth of growth? Or do you allow them to be promoted to the next grade? And I can tell you that is not an easy decision. And when you have a kindergartner and you know that they've made progress, and you also know the impact of the impact that retention has on students, that's just a tough call. And so we try to, I often tell teachers, take to the extent that we can, step back and try to look at that situation very objectively. And let me tell you what I often do. I look at us as educators. I've got a first-year teacher, a second-year teacher, a third-year teacher, a 10th-year teacher. If I give them all the same content to teach, I'm going to get different outcomes because the 10th-year teacher has a whole lot more experiences, possibly than the first-year teacher. Does that mean the first-year teacher is not a good teacher? Yeah, she's a good teacher. She just doesn't have the benefit of as many years of what? And sometimes our kids, they are good kids, they're smart kids. They just didn't come from the environment that understood that certain things should be in place in order for them to be ready for kindergarten so they can get kindergarten level content and be prepared for first grade. Do you all know how many people, parents in particular, don't understand that there are actually standards for every grade level? Yeah, you all, because you're educators. You understand that language. But do you know that there are some people, they've never actually taken the time to look to see what are all the standards that my child has to learn for kindergarten or for first grade in every content area. A lot of people, we take for granted because that's our world. We look at the standards. But do you know a lot of people, if they're not in our positions, they've not even taken out time. They don't even know what the standards are saying for all the content areas. And when you think about it, when you add up, when you identify all the standards since your first grade, think about all the standards a first grader has to learn in math and in science and reading, ELA and social studies.
And see, well, but I'm not saying overall. I had a student come to me that he didn't know how to hold a pencil. He could not hold a pencil. He could not write his letters. He couldn't do any of that.
Yeah.
So I had 6 students in one classroom that I made journals for, took highlighters, wrote their names, wrote numbers, they had math. So this is what I had to do. By the end of the year, he was able to hold a pencil, he was able to write. But I did retain him because to send him to 2nd grade, that was just going to put him further and further behind. I'm only talking in just certain situations, not all. But these are things that I have been faced with. And then when you collaborate with the kindergarten teachers, everybody has the curriculum. So when that curriculum, they're trying to keep up with it, and sometimes it falls by the wayside where it comes to the
Well, and to
students.
complicate that work is you have kids who didn't come to your school for 1st grade or kindergarten. They may have come from somewhere else, and they come with these skills that and expectations could have been different. And so I think you did the right thing by working with the child to get up to grade level and hopefully get prepared for the next grade level. And honestly, I can't say you made the right or the wrong choice relative to that student if you retained them. You made the decision you thought was best for the child. And let's hope that the child gets the benefit of a great teacher to get him or her up to grade level so he or she doesn't continue to struggle. That's a tough call, but that's why we need educators like yourselves who think critically and who can look at all the various factors and variables that should be considered when those decisions are made. But at the same time, working with our colleagues in the grade levels that the students are coming from and the grade levels that they're going to the extent that we can, have those vertical conversations to close those instructional gaps. Realizing that even after we do all of that, you're going to have quite a few kids that move into the school in the grade level who come from somewhere else that you didn't have the benefit of talking to their previous teachers. And so no perfect situations, but you need people who are smart enough, who can think critically enough to address those complicated or complex issues. So I think you did what you thought was right, and I'm confident that the student is doing well if he had the benefit of a teacher like you. But I don't think that there's one solution fits all.
No, it's not. Because
those, you mentioned the kid who couldn't write. That kid could possibly have have some type of disability that could be negatively impacting their ability to process or even manipulate things. And so that's something that would come into consideration, and the question has to be asked: well, how often and how should you retain the child? Or when do you not retain the child? So no one size, one answer fits all.
But that's the reason why you need that input, because when you go into a classroom, it would be nice to come in and do an observation to help the teacher better help the student so that they all would be successful, when sometimes that's not the case.
Well, and again, that's a local, you should be getting that feedback from your principals, not just from your principals, from your assistant principals, from your coaches, from your colleagues. There's nothing that prevents. I would, and all of us that have been principals, my teachers would go and give each other feedback.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's nothing that prevents us from getting feedback. Nothing but our lack of organizing to get it done. So the principal's feedback is important, but you should want more than the principal's feedback. I need my colleagues to come in my classroom. You give me feedback. And then do some vertical observations. Go into that. If you receive kids in the 1st grade, go into that kindergarten class. Give them some feedback. That can help strengthen the process so they are better prepared by the time you receive those kids in 1st grade.
I was able to do that as an EIP teacher, because then I was on the other side. So when I went in and pulled groups and I pushed in, I was able to, truly help and address. But it's just, with explicit instruction, if you don't know it, it's hard to give it. So once you take a little bit of mastery away from what you're used to, so when you're saying we need training, and have somebody model the math from beginning to end, that truly will help. Because if a teacher doesn't know, how effective is she when it comes to her students? So it seems like everybody is curriculum bound, they're this, they're that, instead of coming together and maybe having that wiggle room and say, well, it's this, but we can do this, so we do need.
That's right.
But we need the word from, higher ups.
No, you don't need the word from higher up. That's a principal's role.
Well, but
there's nothing that stops a principal from bringing their teachers together. I didn't need a superintendent to ever tell me that I needed to meet with my middle school principal to figure out what we could do to help strengthen and close those instructional gaps. And if I don't do anything in this district, I want to make sure people understand that you don't need my permission to do what's good for children, to work together as a team to address those complex issues. You don't need my permission to do that. As a matter of fact, the only thing that stops us from doing that is ourselves. You have my support to address those issues. You don't need my permission to tell you for your principal to bring all first grade and second grade teachers together, or to look at the data and figure out how can we give each other feedback, or how can we improve instruction so that our kids, when they land in the next grade, they're stronger in certain areas. You don't need that. You don't need me to give you that permission. We have this deputy superintendent for school leadership, Dr. Simpson. Do they need my permission to do that? Do they need your permission to do that? No, that's the work. That's the work. That's the work. Now, what our responsibility is to ensure resources are available and opportunity and time is available to make those things happen. But that's the work. And I can tell you, our vision is to be a high-performing school district. And high-performing school systems, that's the stuff they do all the time. And I want us to, and you got to help me change that. You don't need my permission to do that. You work with your principal and your colleagues on that grade level or in that department to do that type work. You can't do it alone. You got to work in collaboration with other colleagues. You got to get into each other's classrooms. You got to give each other feedback. You got to, the curriculum is just that, the curriculum, but it's the teacher that brings the curriculum alive through that interaction with the students. And so you got to pull on each other, because sometimes you may look at it one way, but it takes somebody else's perspective to help you see it in a different way. And do you know, how many of you watch, it used to come on, I guess it still does, House, the MD House? You ever notice his strategy when patients get ill? He brings the team together, doesn't he? And sometimes they have illnesses that nobody hadn't seen, or they don't know where they're coming from, but it's those creative people, minds getting together, problem solving, thinking, trying to figure it out, even experimenting sometimes. I mean, some of that stuff would get his license taken away. I'm not telling you to do that. But I think the point is bringing all the smart people together, all the teachers together, and figuring out, here's a challenge, what can we do to get this issue resolved? And that's really where we are. Right now, when we've got 80% of our kids at the beginning and developing level and 20% at the proficient and distinguished level, we got to turn that around. We got to reverse that. Does that make sense? And it's that type of thinking that will reverse that. Okay? So, said not an answer, but something for us to think about. Because all of these are real problems, complex, but the solutions, we are the solutions. And that's what I really want people to understand. We are the solutions. And nobody's going to come and fix this for us. We are the solutions. Okay. Anybody else? That's okay. No, they're not talking. They're giving you the mic.
I just want to say a lot of things was just said there. First thing I want to say is that we have to realize that we are the educators, and there are things beyond our control. We have parents that are way younger than they should be. And we have to be there to pull everybody together. I'm saying that in a sense because I'm used to hearing it takes a village. So the teachers can't do it by themselves, and I understand the child probably had very little parent support, parental support, but we have to get the parents involved in their child's education as well. Right, I truly understand that, but you mentioned something about the standards and the parents not understanding or knowing about the standards. How are they gonna know if we don't give it to them? We know it's out there. You know, like for example, I don't teach children unless I tell the parents, these are the standards your children will be learning in this unit from this time to this time. So they're able to work with me. I can't do it by myself. So again, the state provides us with a plethora of information. So I'm saying we have a lot of parents, some of them just shows just no interest. We have to somehow get them involved. Just like you get children involved in your classroom. They're working and they're doing other things, but we have to figure out a way because their child is not gonna be successful without them. We can't make them successful by ourselves. So the parent helps you help the child write and everything? See, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Beasley, my understanding is we are standards-based. We know what standards need to be taught. We need to pull those standards together and teach those standards that belong together. Because if you know your standards, you know there are different standards in different units that can be taught together.
That's correct. You
do not teach standards in isolation. So that's where I think a lot of teachers are, the pacing is so fast. It's not fast. You have to really, really hone into your academic area and pull those standards that belong together, and you teach those standards together.
Well, I think the challenge that elementary teachers have who are not departmentalized is they're trying to pull standards together from 4 different areas. And honestly, 35 minutes, 40 minutes is not enough sometimes to teach science, and so I understand that reality, and that's why we've got to have principals and teachers working together, thinking critically, how do we approach the problem? Because they want to do it. It's just that, and I recognize that, even as a math teacher, I had several preps, but they were all along the same vein. I could plan for algebra and algebra 2 in pre-calculus. That wasn't difficult. But it takes a certain amount of skill and training when you want to pull together ELA and social studies or science and mathematics, so you can teach the standards and recognize that you don't have as much time, but you want to teach all of the standards. And so that is a reality that we've got to continue to figure out solutions for, especially at the non-departmentalized elementary schools or grade levels. Because you're talking about one person teaching several content areas. But you got teachers like this one here from California who, she likes it. She's probably a pretty, after 34 years you say? She's probably a pro at it, but you've got those who are first-year teachers. That can be a bit overwhelming to them. They want to do a good job, but it takes a little experience, and, so you got to increase in your management skills, your organization skills. You got to know how to integrate that content. And while she's had the benefit of 30-plus years of doing it, someone just walking into the classroom within their first, 0 to 3 years, it could be a bit overwhelming. And that's why we got to have principals and teachers, teacher coaches, and others to support individuals with their expertise and their content knowledge and their experiences. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Pat Walker, and I'm at King Elementary, and I'm an ESOL teacher, and I've been doing, this is my 15th year teaching ESOL in Clayton County, and so I would say that it's just wonderful, but we've had one trouble the entire time that seems to be the worst part of the year, and that's the scheduling. And in elementary school, we departmentalized 4th and 5th grade, and so if our kids in ESOL aren't at least on the same team, then we can't, when we go to get them, they're on different subjects and all that. So I like for them to be kind of grouped together. Sometimes that's not politically correct to have a group of ESOL students in 1 or 2 classes, but if they were in one, you could push in, work with the teacher, and you'd kind of have, they wouldn't lose content area when you were serving it. But then then I wonder, is that a good idea? You know, is that, should it be spread out? But, so it's just kind of a big bear, you know, because we're not supposed to interrupt EIP, math, or language, so I try to serve them only during science and social studies. Then the teachers don't have grades because I pull them out because they're in 3 or 4 different rooms, and if I tried to push into one room, I'd have to take all these kids with me and make one room really crowded. And so it's just kind of always kind of just a big mess like that. And I don't know, like if I were going to do it, I would group them together and put them in 1 or 2 rooms, and then I would push into that class and help the teacher. But
and I would say work with your principal to do what's best for the children.
Yeah.
You know, I hear your concern about grouping and the way it's being perceived, but I don't know if they're getting the benefit of good science and social studies instruction if you're constantly pulling them out.
Right.
When science and social studies instruction is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wonder why the scores in science and social studies for that group of students is not where it ought to be. So again, you'll hear me say this, thinking critically about the work and doing things, identifying the pros and the cons, and doing the things that are in the best interest of our children. And so there are some schools that have figured it out. There are some schools that we've got to maybe work to help figure it out. But the people that need to figure it out are right there at that campus level. Principal and the teachers working together to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do this schedule? We know they need ELA, they need math, they need science, they need social studies. But we also know that they need to get that additional support, whether it be EIP or...
And they can't conflict. Like I can't serve, if one child gets EIP and ESOL, you have to serve them at different times. And so it's just, you know, and because that is best for the child to get all that. And anyway, it's just the one thing I wish I could fix.
Yeah, well, and what I would say is, you know, work with your principal, and we have to send some individuals out there to provide support to the schools, to look at the master schedule, to see how we can implement it. Remember, we've got several waivers now, so even though there's a model that the state may not have supported because we have a waiver, we can create our own model.
Okay.
Just remember that. We're a Swiss district, strategic school system waiver, strategic schools, whatever, waiver system. We have flexibility. So if the model that the state has isn't working for us, then we create our own model. We have that right to
And
do
I've been
so.
working on content. I try to teach, I mean, I'm supposed to be teaching the language of the content of social studies and science. If I'm serving them during that time, that's the goal of an ESOL teacher, but we do more than just the language of the content. We do the content, but still, I don't necessarily do it the same way the teacher would, and I don't make the test and that kind of thing. So it's, yeah.
And what I would just say, just you all look at your data and let your data drive your decisions. If a certain structure is not working for your students as reflected in your data, then you probably need to make some changes, because if you continue to do that structure every year, don't expect the results to be a whole lot different from year to year. And so look at the data, And if you've been doing it, let's say a certain way for the last 5 years and your data has been consistent the same for 5 years, it may be time to change that structure and approach it in a different way. Does that make sense, everybody?
Data is good,
Then you
keep it. You don't just change it.
Don't just change it. That's right.
To understand it.
That's right.
Would use this, is it success?
Success maker, the content reading, corrective reading.
Yeah, what I find.
That's success maker is the math. Are you referring to math?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
well, really to both, because they're both pull-out programs. The parents, well, last year was the first time that I noticed that they're not teaching the same thing that we're teaching in the classroom. It's not an extension of of the standard that they're being taught. So that means if you pull this child out every day at math time, when they get ready to take the Georgia milestone, they're not being tested on anything that they've been instructed on, because they have not had the classroom instruction. The parents are complaining about
Well,
it.
but they should not. Notice you said EIP, right? Early Intervention Program. Those students should not be pulled out of whole group instruction when the content is being taught. EIP is an additional amount of instruction, okay? We're giving away somebody here. Well, and I'm telling you that this conversation, if you go back and you look at our data, we shouldn't be surprised if the students are not getting the grade, as you just said, they're not getting the grade level content. We shouldn't be surprised when they can't pass the grade level test. And so it's not the EIP resource or program, it's our manner in which we're pulling kids away from the grade level content. And we've addressed that with principals. We'll continue to address that with principals. And I think sometimes we do it because it's convenient for the adult scheduling, but it is not good for children. You can't expect me to do college level work if I never have the benefit of college level course and content. But that doesn't happen while I'm teaching the content. Right. There you go. Well, that's a matter of two adults working together, planning together collaboratively, the instruction, the group time, the small group time, in a way that benefits the child. Sometimes if you think about the scenario that you just shared, it's adults planning in isolation. And instead of us sitting down together planning, I just come and pull them out because I plan my own thing down the hall. And so I'm coming to get my group of kids at this time. And that's a reality that you could have depending on the number that you're trying to serve. And you are trying to get them from several locations. But I would. It's not illegal. Yeah. I think that speaks to the philosophy, one's philosophy. But we all have a philosophy, and so I'll tell you should work with your principal to figure out the best way to structure the schedule so you can maximize the students learning the content.
different places, and teachers are in different places in the standards. It's just too
It's
much,
really-
and the children get lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
I'm in Jackson. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Beasley, we have a newcomer.
See, but there's nothing that prevents your school from doing similarly.
So yeah, and I love I've been told, I do EIP and regular ed, just leave my kids in the classroom.
I say that too. But you know, when the kids are coming to you saying, please stop me from going there because I'm not learning anything. Can you please, because I can't do what you guys are doing on the board.
Well, if kids are telling you that, then some adults need to be listening. Because if a kid tells you that, a kid needs to be heard. That's right. Very
Dr.
good.
Beasley, this gentleman waited so patiently for us ladies for a question.
Just to add on to what you guys were just saying, good afternoon. This is my third school district that I've been teaching in. And we all have the same problems that you guys are just talking about. And one of the things that we have done is make a decision not to pull kids from critical area content classes. So we know it may be difficult to, we have to pull them at some particular point in the day, but we choose not to pull during math content time and science content. I know the other teachers may not be too happy with that, but the critical areas is where we cannot pull these kids from. And PE.
Well, let me help you out. There's no federal requirement. We have state rules relative to instructional time. But listen, you all, you work with your principal to do what's in the best interest of children. Work with your principals to do what's in the best interest of children. And that means that sometimes Johnny may not need to go to PE because Johnny may need to spend some time. But at the same time, you don't want to take Johnny away from PE because Johnny may need to do some PE. He may need to do some PE. And so,
Dr. Beasley.
But you see here lies in our challenge. We got all these complex situations, we got all these different beliefs and approaches to things, and it takes people coming together to figure out what's best for children. It's not easy, but there's no one way to do it. It can be done.
Well, I know it's yeah. Well, as an EIP teacher, the EIP lead, the DES, and the ESOL, they all had to get together so that when I pulled my kindergarten class during ELA, that was the time that they were teaching it. So I know I have them 40 minutes of that time, but it was during that block. So if they were in science, I could not pull them if it was ELA. So anytime we pulled, it was during that time. So if it was math, it was during your math section. If it was ELA, it was during that. So if they had swapped maybe for early release, that's when it caused the conflict, because the teacher swapped so that they can get their classes in. But at that time, if it was math for me during my time, but it was ELA because they had swapped, I could not pull them from ELA.
But I want you all to listen to the conversation.
Yeah.
Every single one of these challenges that you all have shared are solvable at the school level.
But that's why I said, if there's any way, I'm just saying, if there was, just like the explicit lesson plan, that came from the county, and then everybody followed it. If there was some kind of schedule of some sort, even if it was just a skeleton, try to follow these guidelines, you'll have more principals that will be in tune to do that. But then they're answering to this person and to that person. And with EIP data, you have to test all these children. Well, if you have a school of over 1,000 and one that has 500, it's easier for them to get it done in that length of time than 1,000 students. But you have some principals that won't go against the grain because it's coming from this person. The data has to be there. So then when you go to your principal, but we've got a deadline. So it's kind of hard to work with it. So that's why I was, Charlie.
Oh, my question is this: at your school, I hear you making a lot of good suggestions. Have you offered those suggestions to your principal?
She's not teaching this year. You're not teaching this year, are you?
She's still at the school and she's a stakeholder.
No, I'm just saying. I didn't know if she was at a school this year, right?
Oh, you're not? Oh, okay.
Yes, but that's why I stated that when there are rules, regulations, the guidelines that come from the county that you have to adhere to, you have some principles that it's hard for them to get around those. Even though we go to them, this is the deadline, this is this, this is that, and they hear us, but this is the deadline. So with that, it's just a little bit difficult. And I know when you said that there's some schools that got it, we might need some of those schools to go around to help the other schools because they're doing, I mean, you know.
Yeah, and in all honesty, you know, we have addressed some of these issues last year. So you're not at a school this year, so I don't know if you're talking about what you see occurring this year or based on one's previous experience. But those same issues we have addressed systemically relative to scheduling, EIP, REP, et cetera. And so I appreciate the feedback, but I think it's important that if we know specifically where we need to provide additional support to a school, that let us know where that is so we can go and make sure that that principal, that school gets the support that they may need. I think it's important that we understand that there are many schools that have figured this out. They have solved these issues. And if there are exceptions to that, we need to know where they are so we can provide them the support. Maybe it's just a matter of providing clarity as to how students should be scheduled. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, Dr. Beasley, I
didn't.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question on your take on vertical alignment. I mean, I didn't mean to change topic, but I was thinking in terms of academic and sport. For example, if you are the coach at a high school level, you would volunteer your time down at the middle school level. So the kids coming up to 9th grade, they will already know the standard that you're looking for. And I've seen this at a former high school that is always on top, making it to the state playoff or the state championship. But what the coaches do is they go to the middle school and they volunteer. So the kids coming in already know the system. And I'm thinking we could possibly do the same thing for our content. Because time and time again, we tend to, during the summer, we have kids doing credit recovery. And that's, in my opinion, that's going backwards. Couldn't we prepare the student, like during the summertime, teach them what their content that they will be going into? For example, if you're leaving from 9th grade going to 10th grade, we can have like 3 weeks of summer school where we do the first week, we teach the basic content, the basic skills necessary for content success. We could do the second week of an overview of Unit 1 standards. The second week we do overview, the third week we do an overview of Unit 2 standards. So by the time the kids go to that next level, they would have already been exposed to each of these content units, so it wouldn't be so foreign. And the same for kids coming from the middle school to the high school level. We could, give them an overview of each of the units, so that way it wouldn't be so foreign. Can you speak on that?
That's a great idea, and as you know, historically, with the promotion and retention policy, funding primarily has been available for remediation purposes, to help students who may not have passed the state test to get a few additional days of instruction, remediated if you will, toward retesting so they could pass the test in order to be promoted primarily in grades 3, 5, and 8. Of course, at the high school level, we used the virtual opportunities to help kids recover credit so they can at least stay on task relative to stay current relative to the credits that they need to matriculate to the next grade level. Now, currently, the policy IHM specifically for promotion and retention has been waived, which means that we've got a little bit more latitude to offer, to be creative with what we offer in summer school, and it just doesn't have to be focused on remediation. And so the idea, as you just shared, would be an idea that we are considering for next year. Instead of, we may have some kids we have to remediate, but we also have some kids, and I would say the majority of our kids probably need to start getting exposed, if you will, to the content for the next grade level. And so we're in the process. We were discussing summer school just yesterday, I believe it was, and we've added that to our agenda to think very creatively about how we're going to approach summer school in our district going forward. So I appreciate the question.
My name is Marquavius Hardy. I'm currently at Tierra Elementary School. And just to address some of the things that I've been hearing in this dialogue, one of the things that I'm listening to is, trying to change like the schedule and different things to fit, the needs of the students. And one of the things I've done is, when I go before my administrators or my leaders, I bring my data with me. And so when I bring my data with me, I let them know, this schedule is not working. I currently teach 4th grade, but for instance, when I taught, 5th grade and, EIP was pushing in or pulling out, and it was during maybe those critical, content areas, when we do a unit assessment, what I would do is I would, bring it forth to my administration and let them know, we're working hard here. And as you can see, we're not producing the results, that we need. So therefore, I would come up, maybe with ways that, we can maybe change the schedule that will fit, the needs of those students. But again, I would just, have something tangible, to bring in front of them, just to kind of show them, maybe, there's a different route than what we're, currently doing, because if it's not working, we need to find a different way.
Like, were you able to make a different kind of schedule, or like he was receptive and, yeah.
If I had to sit down and plan, and I didn't mind, if I had to sit down and plan to, come up with a schedule that will work for the team, and it wouldn't just be me, it would be my team as well. We would bring, those things, to the table to kind of discuss that, this is not working, and then we would sit down and actually develop a schedule, that will work. Now, my principal, she was very receptive of that, not because we just, come to the table saying this needs to be changed, but look at my data, we're not moving, and we're trying to, move our students. So therefore, we had those things in place, to do that. And this is when I was at Kilpatrick Elementary.
Do principals understand that they have the option of moving those schedules around, and everything is not coming directly from the county, is built in stone? Do they understand that?
I would say, I'll let others who may want to respond. Principals know that the principal is responsible for his or her master schedule. So they should know that. Every detail. And when I was a principal, I owned the master schedule.
Because it seems that the complaints about success makers started last year. We just keep hearing this stuff, can't do anything about that. That comes from the county. Can't do anything about that. That's coming straight from the county.
The specifics, complaints being relative to success maker being,
Cutting into content instruction, content instruction.
well, and I've made a note, we'll go back and look at that, because I think this is maybe the second or third time success maker has come up.
I'm not defending Success Maker at all. I do know that last year, I think it was the first year of implementation, and the implementation of anything takes at least 3 years, because we really don't have any data to show whether Success Maker was successful or not. So I can see why it's required. It might be how it's implemented in your school, but again, we don't have any data, so how can we say it's not working?
As far as the program itself, it can't hurt. It definitely can't hurt. I mean, our kids need everything that they can get, but it needs to be in addition to the classroom instruction, not instead of. Yeah, not instead of. At least let the kids be able to get the the guided practice, at least be able to present a new concept for the children, then pull them out. But that doesn't work. Like you said, that doesn't always work, because where this teacher started on is done introducing or the guided practice, the next teacher's not. So how do you pull them together? They're sticking their head in saying, is it a good time? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's not. It's never a good time. So.
Well, and that could be an issue unique to your school. And so I would always say, go back and have a conversation with the principal. But of course, I've made a note, we'll work with our team to make sure that we again ensure that students should not be pulled from the core whole group instruction. Well, listen, you got to make your schedule work. I mean, I used to have pep rallies, and I decided we had to miss class. I ran my school, and sometimes you modify your schedule because you got other things going on, right? And that's what principals do.
School's supposed to be fun, people. What happened to the days when the kids were learning and it was actually fun?
It's still fun. You got to make it fun. It's still fun. It's well, it's all in how you look at it. If regardless of what you think about No Child Left Behind in 2002, it brought to the light that everybody was going to school, but everybody wasn't succeeding. And some folk were just resting on the fact that we just got a great school, but the data, when you drill down into the data, it was a great school for some of the kids, but it wasn't necessarily a great experience for all the kids. And so we're in an age now where that accountability is there, and the data is clear. It speaks volumes, doesn't it? But the data is just the data, but you got to work with your colleagues to address the data. Anyone else? All right, well, I'm not going to just sit here. If you all don't have any more questions, I see it's been a great opportunity. You've given us some food for thought. I want to make sure you all know, Dr. Smith, the Deputy Superintendent. Y'all know Dr. Smith? He's here. We got Dr. Simpson, Deputy Superintendent for School Leadership and Improvement. We got Chief Traywick, our Safety and Security Chief. I see Rod Smith back there, who's our Chief of IT, Technology. We got April, one of his directors, who's been helping us with this G Suite rollout and everything else technology related, right? We got Jada Dawkins here, who's our Chief of Communications, Public Relations, and Marketing. Mr. Thompson over there, I bet you he has a spreadsheet open on that laptop. Our CFO, Chief Financial Officer. Just remember, we're here to serve. So, I'm going to hang around a few minutes because I got high school teachers who may be coming in, but I appreciate you that we're here, elementary teachers, and y'all go ahead and get home and get some rest. All right, and grade some papers. That's right. Thank you all. Good evening, everyone. Well, our elementary teachers, they came and they went. And so we decided to hang around to give our high school teachers in particular, our middle school teachers who are here, an opportunity to interact and converse with us. So thank you all for being here. So let's see what schools we have represented. I know I've got Brown. Very good. Adamson. I heard that. Jonesboro High School, right? Riverdale Elementary High School. Okay. Very good, very good. Well, thank you all for being here today. So really, this is your opportunity to just basically share, what's working, what's not working, gives us an opportunity to respond, or at least to have an iPhone here taking notes so that as we work with the senior team, we're collecting feedback and we're figuring out what needs to be done to improve and to sustain improvements in our district. Your feedback is very important to us, very important to us. So I think the last group, the elementary teachers, we had some pretty good conversations about vertical planning and collaboration and how problems are somewhat complex and it takes people coming together in order to solve those problems. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Hopefully you've heard a vision about our expectation that we will be a high-performing district, our areas of focus for the year, and the areas that we've outlined that we're focusing on in curriculum instruction, assessment, professional learning, the resources that we're working to ensure that our schools have access to. But this is really your opportunity to have a conversation with, or my opportunity to have a conversation with you. And so what I'd like to do is just basically give you a chance to share. I know you've been working all day, so I know you don't want to be here all night. And so who wants to start out? Feel free, don't be afraid.
Good evening. My name is Yvette Franklin. Thank you so much, Dr. Beasley, for this open forum that we have for the educators. For the most part, things are going great in our school, and I see these class sizes are strengthening, so that's good. I also work with the new teachers, and they tell me that before it was like 30-something, but now they see 25, and so that's really working. Now, the question I have is for the challenging students. Now, I know in the past, challenging students, those students that, DES and the other population. So I was wondering, I know you approved the K-12 endorsement and also the TSC endorsement for this school year. So I was wondering if you could revisit the SSC endorsement, because this is a lot of strategies and interventions for the population where it's like DES students and those who need, especially new educators and also veterans, that need a different intervention plan for the ones that they struggle, especially starting readers for the Georgia Hospital test. So it's the SSC endorsement. And I already have applied for it because I don't know if you remember that I was a teacher that I completed in May 2017. Yes. Okay.
We have several endorsements that we're promoting.
Okay.
We have some content area endorsements, and we have coaching endorsements, et cetera.
Okay.
So I'll make sure that we take that back to Dr. Duncan, who works with all of our endorsement programs, to ensure we're really looking at the leadership program as a whole, to ensure we have several pathways for leadership. And as a part of those pathways, clearly there are opportunities to earn some endorsements. Of course, we have some teachers who want to earn at the elementary level some content endorsements in math and science that we currently have occurring.
Correct.
But there are some other endorsements as well. So we'll take that back to Dr. Duncan and let her work with her team to see what we can do to address that endorsement in particular that you mentioned, the SST endorsement.
Yeah, because what happened is that the principals already signed up for it, and I think it was on her desk, I want to say like in April, May. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of thinking, what happened. And I know my area is definitely needed, the SST endorsement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You all came to listen to everyone else? I just came to listen to everyone else, huh? Now, y'all know I'm not going to pull it out of you.
Okay.
But there you go. Perry Center, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
But I did spend 16 years at Riverdale.
Riverdale High School.
And taught 12th grade, and maybe my grade was a little bit more problematic about what I'm going to say. And I'm sorry I couldn't get them to the 19th, and I have no idea the conversation it's had, and I don't want to duplicate it.
That's okay.
And I know it's old school. I looked at my SLDS. You familiar with the state longitude test?
Yes, sir.
Now, where I'm at is serving this purpose.
I was going to ask some
74% of the kids I teach missed more than 10 days of school last year.
Sir.
Now, it says Clayton County's 24% and the state's 22%, and I still think those numbers are somewhat cooked. I don't know, it's just me. So I always go back to an attendance policy. I think a lot of things lead to that. And when I went into high school, we had a pretty good one, and I know these things have changed, and there's a lot of pressures for graduation rates and stuff. So I just think, and you need a lot of resources to do this, and I understand that, but if they're not there, it makes it hard. But I do appreciate that. I think we're branching out more to other options, including online and things, and we have to be more forward-thinking to the needs of our students. And I believe you're doing a good job of that.
Thank you, sir.
The other thing I see in the SLDS system is the Lexile score, period. And every time you look at the Lexile score, if they're below the range, they fail the tests. If they are above the range, they're proficient and exceeds, and it's that easy. But I was teaching 12th grade economics, and it kind of broke my heart to say, you're going to struggle. You can't, we need to work on these words, but you've kind of missed out on a lot of your education and your words, and you wonder where you can give reading support to even a 12th grader. But before they even get to 12th grade, how do we move them forward if they've, missed out on so many key things along the way? And it just keeps piling up, and their self-esteem is falling. They don't know where to go to, and we're stretched with resources as it is, but where do you give that reading support? And I always thought social studies, we support reading better than anybody when it comes to the language that we're expected to know every day. But that's kind of too old school. Reading is fundamental, and attendance matters. I always tell my kids 90% of success is showing up on time, and I still believe that. So
You should.
has this conversation come up before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't want to duplicate that.
No, you're okay to duplicate, but I'll just share with what we've done so far with attendance. Last year we started working with the Safety, Security, and Attendance Discipline Task Force, and attendance was an area that continuously was under our radar because we were monitoring that data, working with principals to make sure we implement the attendance protocols, et cetera. Well, we enhanced the protocol this year, and in the month of July we met with even Judge Teskey's office to create a special court just for attendance. And so within the first few weeks of school, individuals and families who had attendance issues that percent that you spoke of earlier, clearly they will be getting communications as to expectations. And honestly, Judge Teskey has appointed a judge to just oversee attendance for our school district. So we met with him. So you should see a fundamental difference in attendance, because your philosophy is all of our philosophies. We can't, and I shared this with the judge when we met, this community should not expect students to improve in their performance if this community doesn't get their children to school, because we can't teach them if they're not in school. And they are using last year's data, and we're identifying students using last year's data, getting those students the appropriate notifications now, so we don't end up in the same boat we were in last year relative to that data. So you should see an improvement. If you notice in the student handbook, the attendance protocol, there was an addendum added to the student handbook just to outline that enhanced attendance protocol, because we had already started printing the student handbook based upon what was approved at the end of last year. But when we met in July, we modified it and we created an addendum that everyone received, and we are working to implement that protocol right now. So we should see an improvement. Now, relative to the other issue that you mentioned, I think it's important that, literacy is still a priority. And you know as well as I know that by the time the kids get to the 10th, 11th, 12th grade, since you mentioned 12th grade, that the goal at this point is to ensure that they have some strategies to help them grapple with, if you will, the various levels of text. And so I'm really counting on the teachers to work with the principals to ensure that we know what those literacy strategies are, that we expose our kids to those challenging texts, the complex texts, because you and I know in order to be successful with complex text, you've got to be exposed to it. Not every now and then, but on a daily, consistent basis. And so clearly we've got some students who need the support of some foundational reading skills, and hopefully you've got individuals that are positioned at the campus level to provide them that support. I would encourage you to work with your principal to see if there are some creative, innovative ways of using the Title I funds in the event that there are some opportunities to provide the students access. I did meet with the Director of Library Services for the Clayton County, and there are some resources that they have available that I'll be working with her. As a matter of fact, I'll be framing up something to go to some key staff members today once I get home and go through all my notes after my meeting with her that will help us address just that. There are some resources, and I think the work there is for us to encourage our students to take full advantage of these resources. You know, the truth of the matter is we don't have enough reading teachers. We don't have enough reading teachers, and honestly, from my experiences in former districts, even when you want to hire reading teachers, you can't find individuals with those reading endorsements. And so we've got to find very creative, innovative ways to help our kids address those reading gaps, deficiencies. And one way to do it is we've got to build into our instruction some opportunities for them to deal with the complex text, but strategies to help them deal with that complex text and you know, things that we take for granted, underlining, using a dictionary. You know, I often wonder why, you know, I remember when I was in school, my teacher, all of us on our desk had a dictionary. Now, I guess now you have iPhones, so you don't necessarily need a dictionary. But if you ran across a word, there was just a common practice in our classroom, in my English class or any classroom, you need to look up the word and make sure you write down the definition, understand it. Those are strategies, whether we realize them or not, that help all of us achieve at least the college degree that we all do have today. So I would say just work with your staff to look at those literacy strategies, and maybe if you can't do all of them, figure out what are some strategies we can do as a faculty to encourage our students, first to make sure that they're exposed to that complex text in all content areas. You should not be the only subject in which they're exposed to that complex text. The math teachers, the science teachers, the specials, all of the PE, the health teachers, they should be exposing students to complex text. And since everyone is exposing students to the complex text, then everyone should be using those strategies, those literacy strategies. And whether we realize it or not, or it is still helpful today when you've got a piece of literature or a text in front of students. It's okay for students to even hear you read as an adult. It's okay for them to read. And I told all the principals a few weeks ago, go back and revisit those homework policies. You say, well, we stopped giving homework because they didn't do it. Well, then maybe they just stopped doing it because we stopped giving it. We've got to go back to our high expectations and let our kids know that there are some things we need you to do well beyond the classroom. We need you to practice math problems. We need you to practice reading, and we need you writing. We need you writing. How many of us went through college and didn't do any work outside of class? How many of us went through college and didn't take any notes? So I don't know how we're preparing our K-12 students if we know those things helped us to be successful to earn a college degree, but we're not requiring them of our students. And so I encourage everybody to go back and work with your principals and your faculties to ensure that those things are the expectation. They are the expectation. You say, oh, we don't want to get anybody upset. Well, people are already upset because the children can't go, they can't read, or they can't get into the college of their choice. So I'd rather them be upset that I'm giving them more than enough work preparing them rather than them be upset that I'm not preparing them at all to be successful. So it's just a matter of which lack of pleasure are we are we willing to deal with? I'm okay with parents saying, you know what, you just make them read too much. That's a good thing. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Well, you all know I'm not going to hold you longer than I have to. But we have, while you give her the mic, we have, just so you'll know, we're taking all these concerns and we're working with the cabinet and other groups to make sure as we look at issues and concerns, inform our decisions so we can improve. And so we'll be doing sessions like this throughout the year. And sometimes there'll just be follow-up to share with the things that we have done, what we are doing to address the issues and the concerns, okay? But remember, the solutions, a lot of the solutions are at the school level. And that's one thing we're working with principals to understand. You don't need my permission to bring your faculty together to revise your homework policy. I already told you you need to do it. You don't need my permission to expect students to do homework in their content area, core content areas, at least, Monday through Thursday. You don't need my permission to have your teachers meeting vertically with the middle school to close any gaps relative to the data that may exist as kids matriculate from middle to high school. You don't need my permission to do that. Those are things that principals do in high-performing school districts. And so I'm just counting on you all to go back and work with your principals to do what high-performing school districts do. And that's look at the problem, pros, cons, figure out all the angles to the problem, and figure out what's the best way to solve this for our children. Think very critically about the situation. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Dr. Beasley. First, I want to thank you because before you became the superintendent, I sat in the PLC where you were telling us about how you're going to revise the discipline process and procedures. You were taking our concerns. You were talking about implementing AP classes and making it mandatory. And one thing I will say is you've definitely been a man of your word. So I appreciate that. My question was, coming new into the district last year, I went through new teacher orientation, and I got about 45 minutes on the reading aspect, on the reading program. I'm in elementary. It wasn't, in my opinion, enough, let me put it that way. I wasn't able to get any kind of assistance as far as extra training, like actually in the school year. So I was wondering, and the training I did get was in the summertime. It wasn't mandatory, but I felt like I was really lacking in it, and that was one of my goals. I have found that when it's not mandatory for teachers to go to certain trainings, they will not go on their own time. And it's usually in the core areas like math and ELA that you're speaking about, and that teachers don't often know what are evidence-based strategies. What is one way where we can be consistent and make it mandatory that certain things be taken by every teacher? Even if there are a science or a social studies teacher, you still are, as we say, a reading teacher, and so you still need to know reading.
Well, that's a great question, and we were just, Dr. Simpson, you want to come in and share our conversation? We were just discussing that yesterday. Because we know that when we look at our data, we know we need to improve content. Reading is important. I made a note about the teacher orientation and reading 45 minutes, so I'll talk to Dr. Duncan about that. And I know they try to cover a lot in teacher orientation, but reading instruction is very important. And I don't want us to assume that everybody gets what they need. And even sometimes you may have gotten it, but as you prepare to go into the classroom, you may need a refresher. So that's important. So I made a note to share that. But Dr. Simpson, you all know Dr. Simpson. He's our Deputy Superintendent for School Leadership and Improvement. He supervises all the schools, and he's just joining the Clayton team this year. And we're so pleased to have him. But we had a conversation in cabinet about professional learning and teacher participation and staff participation, because it's not just teachers, it's every level. So I just want to kind of toss it to him to share some things that we're considering and looking at to improve that participation.
Yeah, and we had an extension of that conversation yesterday or last evening.
Yes, sir.
Way after hours. But, it's kind of almost like an intersection of your moral and intrinsic values as it relates to why you became a teacher. You know, as a teacher, one who is, taking upon this profession to serve children, you've got to internalize that in order for you to become better at your profession, that it's going to require training. There's not an organization that exists, and I'm talking private, corporate, Fortune 500 companies. They go through yearly or annual training every year to get better. And so, for a teacher to not want to hone their craft, that almost tells us the type of teacher that we have, or teachers that we have. And so, while Dr. Beasley and I had this conversation, we want to make sure that a person is intrinsically motivated to want to become better at their profession and being able to meet the needs and helping children grow. And in order to do that, then you're going to have to embark upon some continuous and frequent professional learning as it relates to your content area and anything that's going to equip you with strategies so that you can better meet the needs of your children. So, yes, it should be. We can say it's required, but then why should we have to say it's required? Is the bigger question. Why should we have to say it's required? Because here's the question, and this is what I've always asked teachers: are you the type of teacher you would want your child to have? Would you want your child's teacher to attend frequent and annual training to get better so that they could provide quality instruction to your child? And I can guarantee you every single teacher will answer that question affirmatively. Well, then, if that's what you would want as a parent, then what makes you think these children don't deserve the same thing? Okay, their parents may not be running up to your classroom and sitting in and visiting, but we have to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves. That's where that moral responsibility comes from. So, we have to truly, really do some soul searching and making sure, yes, we can make it mandatory, but as a professional, as a human that said you wanted to get before children and teach children, then you have to conceptualize that everything that comes along with that is going to be about growth and development. So we always say that you have to have the will and the skill. And you can have the will all you want to, but you got to work on that skill. People wonder why Stephen Curry shoots about 50% from the field, field goals, jump shots, 3-point shots. But they never talk about the 1,000 shots he takes on a daily basis. It's muscle memory. But look at what it got him. It got him a $200 million contract. And so if we want to truly become the best, we're going to have to continue to work. So now, as a teacher, because all of you, I'm sure, are doing this, we have to become better team players and lifting our teachers up and motivating them, even from the teacher ranks and not necessarily coming from the teachers. We know it's some weak links. And we have to be very, very courageous at calling those weak links us, because ultimately what you're doing is you're hurting a child. And that's just calling it bluntly what it is. You are hurting children. And for those that are doing so, we have to be very, very bold and courageous and say, I can't allow for you to come here every day and give 50%. So this is a very, very good question. Very good question. So to answer the question in the end is yes. You're going to have to attend training. Absolutely. And for those that do not, then you're going to have to answer some questions. We're going to look at your data, and your data is going to tell us everything. I know we despite the challenges of the children that's coming into your classroom, you can grow every child. You can grow every child, and I'm a firm believer of that. So they're gonna have to attend this training. If not, they're gonna have some serious questions to answer.
You can't have 80% of your kids performing at developing beginning levels and people not going to training. And so, as Dr. Simpson shared, we're working with principals to look at their data and to be very intentional about who needs to go to what training. Let the data drive who has to participate. Even if that means sometimes you may need to get a teacher leader to go and then come back and and work with others on the campus. You know, we've restructured the ISFs, so every school can have access to support in the 4 content areas. So you don't just have an ISS who just happens to just love English language arts, but that's not the area that you all need support in. So now you have support, job-embedded support in all 4 content areas. But I think what I heard Dr. Simpson say, it's about changing a culture. And I'm more interested in not necessarily mandating training, but culturizing this district for high performance, which means that we're going to work with our principals, and we had that conversation with them today. Professional learning is an area of focus. If it's an area of focus, I can assure you that I'm going to be looking at the data. The principals, Dr. Simpson, Dr. Smith, all the assistant soups and the principals are going to be using that data. As a matter of fact, I shared with Dr. Simpson, that was one area that gave me grave concern last year, the participation of our teachers in content-based professional development. So as we've shared, we'll provide a litany of opportunities, internal PD, external PD. I have right now some service providers, PD service providers that I know provide excellent literacy and math training that principals have been made aware of, and they're signing up to participate. This is my expectation. You will participate in professional development. Whether it's internally provided, externally provided, or a combination, you will participate. And until the data tells me otherwise, that is not an area that I'm negotiating in. And so you'll see through actions, very specific actions principals will be taking, an increase in that participation. Realizing that we understand life, you know, people have children and, you know, and families, but like I share with principals, you're gonna have a family this time next year too. But you don't want anything to get in the way of your opportunities to maintain employment with the district. Does that make sense? Just like I have to improve, and this board expects me to improve as a superintendent, everybody else has to do what? Improve. It just doesn't mean me. I have to improve, all of us, because it's the right thing for our children. So more to come. If you have any ideas, let us know. All right. Anyone else?
Thank you, Dr. Beasley. I've been in the district for 27 years, and I've taught several grade levels. And I think one of the things that I'm looking for is a spirit of excellence. That's all that I'm asking for. That's all that I'm seeking. I think one of the things that we really need to address is not just having the theory, it's the application. We're turning too many people loose in the classroom without the proper training, especially in the area of literacy. Oftentimes, I know we have to have e-subs and we have people who are new to the profession, but we have to do more than just going in, sitting down, watching what they're not doing correctly. Somebody has to be willing to roll up their sleeves, push in, and help these people in order for our students to be successful. As a third grade teacher, it is very hurtful to see third grade students sitting before me who cannot read. Having taught first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and I've been a literacy coach, I know that this task can be done, but more training has to be provided. I think one of the areas in which we're really lacking is standards-based instruction. For a long time, we've been a duck, but we can't quack. We put our standards up on the board, but oftentimes teachers have a different perspective as to what the standards are asking the students to be able to do and understand. That's one of the areas that I really think that we need to also look at as well. I tried to sit here and not say anything, but.
Good. No, I think that's important. And we are, you know, our goal is standards-based. And, you know, it's amazing. It's great that's why it's important for you to come to these sessions. Because I remember, Dr. Simpson, you remember when we rolled out standards-based instruction in DeKalb, I identified 23 indicators of standards-based instruction, and that became the framework that everybody had to use to ensure that we were using standards-based instruction in all of our classrooms. It may be our time to really revisit standards-based instruction. And let me tell you why I think so. Because we've had a lot of turnover, and you use the term standards-based instruction. I wonder how many of our teachers currently on the workforce even understands what the term even implies. And so standards-based instruction is important. It's important. Of course, we have content standards, what students should know and be able to do. but there's a lot of planning that goes into that, and there are certain things that you should see evidenced in a standards-based environment. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate you sharing that we want excellence. We do want to train our teachers. Now, we've got a lot that we've got to grow now because we're dealing with the lack of teachers in so many areas that we're bringing in individuals, we're training them up, if you will. But I'm good with that because I know that I'm a pretty good teacher myself, and I know that we have some individuals out here on our staff who are pretty good teachers, and we can train up people to be pretty good teachers. And so I'm okay with that, but you're right. We want to train them to achieve excellence. And I think as we do that, we're creating that culture of high performance, and high performance and achievement will naturally occur because we've got that culture of high performance. So you've given me some homework to do. I may have to go back and pull out some of my resources for standards-based instruction and just help people understand, okay, here's some things for you to think about as you ensure that your classroom is a standards-based classroom. Okay? Appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. My name is Janine Douglas, and I actually have two thoughts I'd like to share. And please forgive me, I'm coming straight from work, so I don't know what I may have missed and what may have already been addressed that I'm about to share. I am fairly new to Clayton County. This is my second year. I'm a TAP candidate. So, but I bring forth experience from the corporate sector, from the pharmaceutical industry, as well as previous experience teaching in the private sector. And my first thought, or just point I'd like to just share, because I don't know how much truth there is. I've made a couple phone calls, but maybe not enough. I have twin boys who are both diagnosed with autism, and they're 15 and a half years old, and they are way below reading level. Originally, we started off in Fulton County with education, I was pleased with that. I put them in the private sector for a certain number of years until I felt like their reading was not excelling, and currently they're in DeKalb County with Dad. And so my thought is, of course, you know, any teacher always wants the best for your own. And so when I came to Clayton County, my first thought was, well, let me find out what the best schools are here, and let me see if there's any way my children can get into those. And right off the bat, I was told if the GPA was not 3.0, there's no consideration. And so I just want to share the thought of a parent who's in education, doing her best, and more than that, for everyone else. I just think that maybe there should be some consideration or privileges that maybe we as educators could have that maybe the regular individual may not have. And I'm speaking from the standpoint that when I was in the private sector, there was a point in time wherein teachers could go to school and work in the school as an educator and not pay tuition in the private industry because our salaries weren't quite as high as the public sector. So that was one of the perks that you received as an educator. And so just a thought that, and I know each case is unique, but one of my sons has such wonderful character, leadership ability, oratorical skills, and so forth. However, the GPA is not 3.0. And as a parent who's given my all plus, I just don't think it's fair that they can't at least be given an opportunity to try. And I was told that that's just the way it is. So that was the first thought. The second thought, because I do have twins that are on the spectrum, and I have observed various cafeterias and how our children are fed in the public sector. Suggestion. Is there any way we can minimize the amount of sugar our children are getting? And can we possibly, as a county, come up with a definition as to what all of our schools are going to do? Because I do understand that, you know, we have different leadership at the various schools and they have options and choices. However, I know up north where I'm from, my mom retired from a school system wherein their rule of thumb was if sugar was the first ingredient, they could not bring it in the school. So I'd like to address sugar as well as the processed foods that we bring in that are full of dyes. And I share the sugar because last year I taught, this was my first year, my first period, I taught 8th grade, and one student in my class, he's so sweet, but he would come in class on pancake and waffle day, and the child just couldn't sit still. I mean, he came in jumping up and down, "Good morning, Miss Douglas," and I could always tell. So, you know, just something to think about, because not even in just the middle school, I'm talking about pre-K all the way up. This sugar is something else in our diet. And so if we as a county could define what would be the absolute, you know, minimum we could do so that our scholars, our future, you know, presidents and CEOs and so forth can sit in the classroom and learn because they've had a breakfast that was fairly nutritious but very low in sugar.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll give you an assignment. I want you to write this name down. Audrey Hamilton. Audrey Hamilton. She's our director for school nutrition. But I want you to email her and ask her what is the district's approach to reducing sugar. And I want you to know we do have a wellness policy, and they've been working to reduce the amount of sugar in the food that our students are eating. But I want you as a teacher and a parent to email her and give her a chance to respond to you, okay? Relative to the issue with the GPA, you know, we have a school choice process, and every year we look at that process. We tweaked it last year because we're always interested in doing what's good for children. And sometimes what I've found is that adults will put criteria in place because those criteria are good for adults. Yeah, even, you know, Dr. Simpson will tell you this, we were dealing with a situation, Chief, where a kid was assigned to the alternative school for 4 semesters. How many years is 4 semesters? That's 2 years. I think with a weapon, you don't go to, you get a year. So my question is, why do we as adults, why are we signing kids to, that's like me suspending you without pay for 4 years, for 4 semesters. Would you appreciate that? No, you would. You wouldn't have it, would you? But guess what? I wouldn't even do that because it's not right. I've learned not to do unto others as I wouldn't want those individuals to what? Do to me. And so we're even looking at that. So I appreciate you sharing that comment as we continue to look at our internal policies and practices. School choice comes up every year. We improved it last year. It will come up again this year. Am I to say that 3.0 requirement will be taken out? No. But I can say that there are we can identify a litany of criteria, and if they meet, let's say 2 or 3 out of 4 criteria, they should be able to qualify. And the reason I like to do that approach, you said, is there a special consideration for children if they're children of educators? I think if it's good enough for our children, it's good enough for everybody's children. And so I'm not one, and that's just who I am as a person, I'm not one to favor giving our children special perks over the community who pays the taxes for us to be here. So if it's, again, a consideration for ours, if it's good enough for us to consider it for ours, it should be good enough for us to consider it for every child who lives in this county. Any others? All right. Well, you all have done well. So, Jada, I think we're finished today.
Yes, sir.
And it's been a long day, and I think I got an invite just from, I should have just not answered that text message. But I answered it. I got to go to another event, but I appreciate you all for being here today. And just know we'll have some more of these throughout the year, just to even provide updates, to give you an opportunity to share, you know, what's working, what's not working, and even beyond this year, because I want you all to know that we value your role, what you do, and what you say. We're in this thing together, aren't we? Yep. And if you're going to create a culture of high performance, it's not one person, it's all of us working together as a team. I want to make sure you know who we have in the room. I'm going to start over there with our CFO, who's probably looking at a spreadsheet, Mr. Thompson. Our Chief Financial Officer. We've got Safety and Security Chief Treywick here. We've got Jada Dawkins, Chief Communications Officer. We've got Dr. Simpson. You've heard from him tonight, our Deputy for School Leadership and Improvement. And we've got Rod right here, my Technology Chief. So blame him for not being able to see my email that I sent the other day. Some folk didn't claim their account, so they couldn't see that. And then we have April here, who works with Rod as one of the instructional director, technology director. And then, of course, we've got some of Jada's staff here. Y'all wave your hand. We got Nikki here and Ronald back there. They are just, I'm working them this year, aren't I? But I hope they're having fun.
We are. Blessed.
We're having
a
fun.
great time.
Because this is really what we should be doing as a school district. And so next month we'll be going beyond this location. We'll be going into the communities next month to give our parents the same opportunity. And this cabinet will let you know in our, we're using the classroom at G Suite. We have our own classroom, and all the feedback. When I leave these sessions, I summarize and I add it to cabinet so they can see all the feedback, and we're using that feedback to inform our conversations and our decisions so we can make it better for our school district. So thank you all for your participation, your thoughts, your feedback, and I look forward to seeing you as I visit your schools and your classrooms. So have a great rest of the year, okay? Thank you all.